The cold was the first thing I learned to endure. Not the kind that numbs your fingers or reddens your cheeks, but the soul-deep cold that seeps into your bones and makes a home there, whispering that warmth is nothing but a cruel memory. In the dungeons beneath the Dark Realm's capital of Umbreth, cold was mercy. It meant you were still alive enough to feel. I didn't know how long I'd been here. Time loses meaning when you can't see the sun, when the only rhythm marking your days is the irregular shuffle of guards bringing stale bread and brackish water. The iron shackles around my wrists had worn grooves into my skin, permanent bracelets of scar tissue that would never fade. My cell was carved from black volcanic rock, walls that seemed to absorb what little light filtered down from the torches in the corridor above. Sometimes I pressed my palms against those walls, feeling their rough texture, reminding myself that I was real, that I still existed. They had taken my name first. That's what they do in the Dark Realm to prisoners deemed too dangerous or too valuable. They strip away your identity until you become nothing but a number scratched into a ledger somewhere in the citadel above. I was prisoner 471, though even the guards rarely bothered with numbers. To them, I was simply the girl or the one in the deep cell, or, more often, nothing at all. Invisible, forgotten. The dungeon complex sprawled beneath Umbreth like a cancerous growth, level upon level descending into the earth's belly. I was housed in the lowest tier, where they kept the political prisoners, the heretics, and those whose very existence was meant to be erased. The air here tasted of metal and despair, thick enough to choke on during the worst nights when the screams from other cells echoed through the stone corridors like the wailing of restless ghosts. My only companions were the rats, brave, hungry creatures who'd learned I meant them no harm. I'd named the boldest one Whisper, and she would occasionally creep close enough to take crumbs from my fingers. In a place devoid of kindness, her trust felt like treasure. The guards rotated in shifts that I'd memorized over countless cycles. There was Torvin, young and cruel, who liked to spit into the food bowls before sliding them through the bars. Marta, older and tired, whose eyes held something like pity, though she never spoke a word. And Greaves, the captain, whose very footsteps made my heart race with fear. He was the one who'd administered most of my interrogations in those early days, days that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life entirely. They'd wanted information. About my village, about the people who'd helped me, about the whispered rebellion brewing in the borderlands between the Dark Realm and the Kingdoms of Light. I'd given them nothing but silence and screams, and eventually they'd stopped asking. Now I was simply storage, a body kept alive for reasons I no longer understood. But lately, something had changed in the dungeon's atmosphere. The guards whispered more urgently in the corridors. Their routines became erratic. Twice in the past week, or what I thought was a week, prisoners had been removed from cells and never returned. The sounds of marching boots echoed more frequently overhead, and the distant rumble of what might have been. Thunder, or might have been something far worse, shook dust from the ancient stones. It was during one of these tremors that I first heard his name spoken aloud. The Shadow Prince has broken the seal at Thornhaven. Torvin hissed to another guard as they passed my cell. They say he commands an army of living darkness. The High Regent has ordered all prisoners of value to be moved to the upper fortress. That exiled bastard, the other guards scoffed. He's been gone 20 years. Why would he return now? Because, Torvin's voice dropped to barely a whisper, they say he's looking for something, or someone, the Shadow Prince. Even in my cell I'd heard the stories, how he was the youngest son of the Dark Realm's previous ruler, born with an affinity for shadow magic so powerful it frightened even his own family. How he'd been exiled as a child when his powers manifested violently, killing 3 courtiers who'd attempted to bind his abilities. The tales painted him as either a monster or a martyr, depending on who told them. Some said he died in the wastelands beyond the realm's borders. Others claimed he'd been building his strength, waiting for the right moment to reclaim his birthright. I'd never given the stories much credence. In the Dark Realm, legends were weapons, used to control and frighten the population. But now, feeling the dungeon walls shudder with each distant explosion, I wondered if perhaps some legends were rooted in truth. That night, if it was night, I couldn't sleep. The tremors had grown more frequent, and with them came sounds I'd never heard before, the clash of steel, shouts of alarm, and something else. A sound like wind rushing through a vast cavern, except we were already underground, where no wind should reach. It raised the hair on my arms and made my pulse quicken with something I'd almost forgotten: hope. Hope was dangerous here. Hope was the cruelest torture of all, because it made you believe in possibilities beyond these walls, beyond the cold and the darkness and the certainty of your slow death. I'd trained myself not to hope, not to dream, not to remember the feeling of grass beneath my bare feet or the warmth of my mother's hand in mine. Those memories were acid on open wounds, but tonight hope crept in anyway, uninvited and unwelcome. The explosions grew closer. The walls didn't just tremble now. They shook violently enough to send chips of stone clattering to the floor. Somewhere above, I heard guards shouting, their voices high with panic. Prisoners in nearby cells began to call out, some with prayers, others with desperate pleas for release. I stayed silent, pressed against the back wall of my cell, watching the corridor through the bars. Then the torches went out. Not flickered, went out completely. All at once, as if something had devoured their light. The darkness that followed was absolute, heavier than any night I'd experienced, even in these depths. It pressed against my eyes like a physical weight, and for a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but exist in that terrible void. And then I heard footsteps. Not the familiar clomping of guard boots, but something softer, more deliberate. They moved through the corridor with absolute confidence, as if the darkness was no obstacle at all. As the footsteps grew closer, I noticed something impossible. The darkness around them seemed to move, to flow like liquid shadow, and within that shadow, 2 points of dim crimson light appeared, eyes, looking directly at my cell. At me. A voice emerged from the darkness, low and resonant, with an accent that spoke of old nobility and older power. Prisoner 471, the girl who gave them nothing but silence. A pause, and I could have sworn I heard amusement in his tone. I've been searching for you for a very long time. The shadows coalesced, taking form. A figure stood before my cell, tall and cloaked in what appeared to be living darkness that writhed and shifted around him like a second skin. Beneath the cloak I glimpsed elegant armor of dark steel and a face that was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, all sharp angles and dangerous grace. His eyes, those crimson points of light, studied me with an intensity that made me want to look away, but I found I couldn't. "Who are you?" My voice came out as a rasp, rough from disuse. His lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "I am Kael Shadowborn, once prince of this forsaken realm. Now it's reckoning." He raised one hand, and the shadows around him surged forward. The lock on my cell door didn't break. It simply ceased to exist, dissolving into darkness. "And I am here to offer you a choice." He stepped into my cell, and with him came the scent of midnight storms and wild places far from any dungeon. "You can stay here and wait for the High Regent's forces to kill you, because they will, the moment they realize they're losing this battle. Or you can come with me, step into the unknown, and perhaps find answers to questions you didn't even know to ask." My shackles suddenly felt heavier. Why me? Why would the Shadow Prince himself come to the lowest dungeon for a nameless prisoner? Something flickered across his face. Recognition. Sorrow. It was gone too quickly to identify. "Because you're not nameless, not to me. You are Arya Lightweaver, daughter of the border villages, born under the eclipse moon with power in your blood that these fools couldn't begin to understand. You are the reason I've returned, the reason I've waited 20 years. He extended his hand toward me, palm up, an invitation. "You are the key to breaking the curse that has poisoned this realm for generations." The name struck me like a physical blow. Arya. I was Arya. The sound of it, in my mind, felt like coming home after an endless journey. Tears burned in my eyes. When had I last cried? but I blinked them back fiercely.
"I don't have any power," I whispered.
"If I did, don't you think I would have used it to escape? Your power is dormant, suppressed by the very walls of this place. The black rock of Umbreth was quarried specifically to dampen magical abilities. But once you leave here," his hand remained extended, patient. "Once you're free, you'll remember what you truly are." Another explosion rocked the dungeon, this one close enough to send me stumbling. Cale didn't move, as steady as the stone itself. Dust rained from the ceiling, and I heard the unmistakable sound of the structure beginning to fail. "Decide quickly, Arya Lightweaver. This fortress is falling, and I cannot hold back the collapse forever." I looked at his hand, then at his face, those strange crimson eyes that seemed to see through all my walls and defenses. Everything in me screamed that this was madness, that I should fear him, that the Shadow Prince of legend could only bring more suffering. But I was already in the deepest pit of the Dark Realm, already stripped of everything but my stubborn refusal to die. What did I have left to lose? I reached out and placed my scarred hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, surprisingly warm, and the shadows around us surged upward like a breaking wave. "Hold on," he said, and the world dissolved into darkness and rushing wind, and the terrible, exhilarating sensation of falling upward. The journey through shadow felt like drowning and flying simultaneously. Cale's magic wrapped around us both, and I experienced the impossible sensation of moving through solid matter as if it were nothing but mist. The dungeon walls passed through us, or we through them, in a dizzying ascent that left my stomach somewhere far below. I gripped Cale's hand with desperate strength, certain that if I let go, I would be lost forever in this darkness between spaces. Images flashed past, stone corridors filled with panicked guards, throne rooms where courtiers fled in terror, massive gates blown off their hinges by waves of living shadow. The entire fortress of Umbreth was under siege, not by an army but by darkness itself, as if night had gained consciousness and declared war on the structures of stone and iron that had held it at bay for so long. Then, abruptly, we were outside. I gasped as cool air hit my face, real air, carrying scents I'd forgotten existed. Growing things, earth, freedom. The transition from shadow to solidity left me dizzy, and I would have collapsed if Cale hadn't steadied me with a hand on my elbow. We stood on a rocky outcropping overlooking the fortress, and I saw Umbreth as I'd never seen it before, a massive structure of black stone and twisted iron, sprawling across the valley like a scar on the landscape. Smoke rose from a dozen breaches in its walls, and the sky above churned with unnatural clouds shot through with crimson lightning. "We need to keep moving," Kyle said, his voice urgent now. "My magic has bought us time, but the High Regent's battle mages will triangulate our location soon enough." I barely heard him. After years, how many years? In that cell, the open sky was overwhelming. Stars glittered overhead, more than I remembered, impossibly bright. The moons of Ethelmore, 3 silver crescents in different phases, hung like jewels against the velvet darkness. I'd forgotten there could be so much space, so much vastness beyond stone walls. "Arya," Kyle's voice sharpened. "I know this is difficult, but we must move now." I tore my gaze from the sky and found him watching me with something like understanding in those strange eyes. Up close, without the drama of shadow and dungeon darkness, I could see him more clearly. He appeared to be in his late 20s, though if the stories were true, and he'd been exiled 20 years ago, he should be younger. Magic did strange things to aging in Ethelmore. His dark hair was longer than was fashionable in the realm, pulled back from a face that was all aristocratic lines and hard-won experience. The shadows still clung to him, never quite dissipating, moving with a life of their own. "Where are we going?" I asked, finding my voice. "Somewhere they won't think to look. Somewhere I've prepared for exactly this moment." He gestured toward the north, where dark forests stretched toward distant mountains. "Can you walk, or shall I carry you?" The thought of being carried like a helpless child sparked something defiant in my chest. "I can walk." It was partially a lie. My legs, unused to more than pacing my small cell, trembled with each step. The shackles were gone, dissolved by Kyle's magic along with the cell lock, but my wrists ached where they'd rested for so long. My bare feet, toughened by years on cold stone, still struggled with the uneven terrain of natural earth. But I refused to show weakness, refused to be anything but strong now that I was finally, impossibly free. Kyle set a steady pace, not fast enough to exhaust me, but quick enough that I knew he was serious about the danger. He moved through the darkness with preternatural grace, never stumbling, never hesitating, as if he could see perfectly despite the limited moonlight. Occasionally he would pause, his head tilting as if listening to something I couldn't hear, then adjust our direction slightly. "How did you know about me?" I asked after we'd been walking for perhaps an hour. My legs burned and my lungs ached, but talking distracted from the discomfort. "How did you even know I was there?" He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I've been watching the Dark Realm for 20 years, waiting for the right moment to return. I have sources, people who still remember the old ways, who believe the High Regent's rule has poisoned this land. When they captured you 3 years ago, word reached me within a week. 3 years. 3 years of my life consumed by that cell." The number felt both impossibly long and strangely short. "But you didn't come for me then," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "No." His jaw tightened. "I couldn't, not until now. The High Regent had fortified Umbrath with wards specifically designed to repel shadow magic. It took me 3 years to find a way to break them, and even then I needed the chaos of the rebellion to create enough distraction." He glanced at me, and something in his expression softened. "Every day you spent in that cell, I felt it. Believe me when I say I came as soon as I could." Before I could process that statement, he stopped abruptly, one hand raised for silence. In the distance, I heard the sound that had alerted him, the baying of hounds. Not ordinary dogs, but the deep trackers, magical beasts bred specifically to hunt through both physical and magical means. The High Regent's favorite tool for pursuing escaped prisoners. "They're faster than I expected," Kyle muttered. He looked around quickly, then his eyes fixed on something behind us, a massive oak tree whose roots created a natural hollow. "In there, quickly!" We squeezed into the hollow, my back pressed against the rough bark, Kale's body a solid presence in front of me. The space was barely large enough for both of us, forcing an intimacy that made my heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear of pursuit. He raised his hands, and shadows flowed from his fingers, spreading across the entrance to our hiding place like a curtain of living darkness. "Don't move," he whispered. "Don't even breathe loudly. They can sense fear." The baying grew closer, accompanied now by the sound of horses and shouted commands. Through the shadow curtain, I could see lights moving through the forest, magical orbs that illuminated the search party's progress. There were at least a dozen riders, and twice that many hounds, their eyes glowing with the same crimson light I'd seen in Kale's eyes, but twisted, wrong, hungry. The pack swept past our hiding place, so close I could have reached out and touched them. The shadows Kale had woven held, but I saw the effort it cost him. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his breathing grew labored. One of the hounds paused near our tree, its massive head swinging back and forth, trying to catch a scent. Its handler jerked the chain, urging it forward, and after a tense moment, it followed the rest of the pack deeper into the forest. We waited in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, when the sounds of pursuit had faded completely, Kyle lowered his hands and the shadows dissipated. He sagged against the tree root, his face pale. "Are you all right?" I asked, surprised by my concern for this near stranger who just destroyed a fortress to rescue me. "Fine, just—" That took more power than I'd like to admit. He took a deep breath, composing himself. "We can't stay here long. They'll circle back once they realize they've lost the trail. How much further to this safe place of yours?" "Another 2 hours if we maintain this pace." "But Arya," he met my eyes and I saw genuine worry there. "I need you to trust me for what comes next. The path requires us to travel through the shadow roads, passageways that exist between the physical world and the realm of darkness. It's the only way to cover enough distance before dawn. The shadow roads. I'd heard stories about them too, whispered tales of people who'd ventured into shadow and never returned. Or returned changed, touched by something that lived in the spaces between light and dark. Is it safe? Even as I asked, I realized the absurdity of the question. Nothing about this situation was safe. For me, yes. I was born to shadow, raised by it after my exile. For you, he hesitated, the roads will test you. They'll show you things, truths about yourself that you may not want to see. But I'll be with you every step, and I swear on my blood and name that I will bring you through intact. I studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Instead, I saw only earnest intensity and something else, something that looked almost like desperation. Why was he so invested in my survival? What was I to him beyond a rescued prisoner? You said I was the key to breaking a curse, I said slowly. What curse? What aren't you telling me? Kale's expression grew guarded. That is a conversation for when we're safe and have time to talk properly. Right now, I need your answer. Will you trust me and walk the shadow roads? I thought about my cell, about the years stolen from me, about the way he'd appeared like something from legend and offered me freedom when I'd given up on ever seeing the sky again. I thought about his hand, warm in mine, and the way the shadows around him seemed protective rather than threatening. Yes, I said. I'll trust you. Something in his expression eased, a tension I hadn't realized he was carrying. Then take my hand again, and whatever you see in the shadows, whatever calls to you, don't let go. The roads will try to separate us, but as long as we're connected, nothing there can truly harm you. I placed my hand in his, and this time I was ready for the surge of shadow that enveloped us both. The world fell away, and we stepped sideways out of reality into something else entirely. The shadow roads were nothing like the journey through the fortress. This was a place, an actual realm of existence that defied normal physics. We walked on what felt like solid ground, but when I looked down, I saw only darkness shot through with veins of deep purple light. The air was thick, almost liquid, and it moved around us with purpose, curious and hungry. Shapes formed in the darkness around us. At first they were abstract, swirls of deeper black against the general gloom. But as we walked, they became more defined. I saw my mother's face twisted with disappointment, my father turning away from me. The villagers who'd betrayed me to the High Regent's soldiers, their expressions a mixture of fear and something that might have been relief. They're not real, Kyle said quietly, his hand tightening around mine. The roads feed on memory and fear. Don't engage with them. But the shapes kept coming. I saw myself huddled in my cell, but this version of me was different. Broken, mad, laughing at nothing. I saw possible futures, myself as a weapon wielded by the High Regent, myself consumed by power I couldn't control, myself standing over Kale's body with blood on my hands. Look at me. Arya, Kyle's voice cut through the visions. Look at me, not at them. I forced my eyes to his face. Those crimson eyes that had seemed so alien now felt like an anchor in the storm. He was solid, real, present, while everything else was phantom and possibility. Tell me something true, he said. Something the shadows can't twist or corrupt. Tell me who you are. I don't know who I am anymore, I whispered. They took that from me. No, they took your name, but not yourself. Who are you at your core? What survived the cell? I thought about it, really thought about it for the first time since my capture. What had survived? What part of me had refused to break even when everything else did? I'm stubborn, I said slowly. I'm someone who doesn't give up, even when giving up would be easier. I'm someone who feeds rats because they're the only innocent things in a place without innocence. I'm someone who still believed somewhere deep down that there had to be more than that cell, even when all logic said otherwise. Yes, Kyle said, and he smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from beautiful to stunning. "That's who you are. Hold on to that." The visions began to fade, unable to sustain themselves against the truth we'd spoken into the darkness. The roads still pressed around us, but they felt less hostile now, more like a neutral force we were passing through rather than something actively trying to harm us. We walked for what might have been minutes or hours. Time had no meaning here. Kyle spoke quietly as we went, telling me about the shadow roads, how he'd learned to navigate them during his years of exile, how they connected all dark places in Ethelmore and could be used to travel vast distances in the time it took to cross a room. "Not many can use them," he explained. "Most people would be consumed or driven mad within moments of entering. You're doing remarkably well. Is that because of the power you said I have?" I asked. "This light magic you claimed I was born with?" "Partially, but mostly it's because you're stronger than you realize. 3 years in that cell should have broken you utterly. Instead, you maintained enough sense of self to recognize truth when I spoke your name." He paused, then added quietly, "That kind of strength is rare." Before I could respond, the darkness ahead began to thin. Real light, grey and watery but undeniably real, seeped through from somewhere beyond. Gale quickened his pace, pulling me toward that light, and suddenly we were stepping out of shadow and into a misty dawn. We emerged in a hidden valley nestled between 2 mountains. A small stone cottage sat near a stream, smoke rising from its chimney. The surrounding forest was thick with ancient trees, and I could sense powerful magical wards humming in the air around the perimeter. This was a place deliberately hidden, carved out of the world, and protected from prying eyes. "Welcome to Thornhaven," Kyle said, "or what's left of it. This was my family's summer retreat before everything. Now it's mine, and no one else knows it exists. You'll be safe here while we figure out our next move." I stared at the cottage, at this promise of safety and rest, and felt something inside me finally give way. My legs buckled, and Kale caught me before I hit the ground, lifting me easily despite his own exhaustion. "I've got you," he murmured. "You're safe now." "I've got you." As consciousness faded, I heard him speaking in a language I didn't recognize, felt the warmth of shelter enfolding me, and for the first time in 3 years, I let myself truly rest. I woke to warmth, real, genuine warmth, the kind that soaks into your bones and reminds your body what comfort feels like. For a long moment I lay perfectly still with my eyes closed, convinced this must be a dream, that I would open them to find myself back in my cell with another day of cold stone and darkness stretching ahead. But the sensations were too vivid to be fantasy. The mattress beneath me was soft, actual fabric and padding, not stone floor. Clean sheets covered my body, their scent faintly of lavender and cedar. A fire crackled somewhere nearby, and beyond that, I heard the gentle sound of running water. Birdsong filtered through what must have been an open window, and with it came the smell of pine and earth and growing things. I opened my eyes slowly, half afraid the world would dissolve into darkness. Instead, I found myself in a small bedroom with exposed wooden beams across the ceiling. Morning light streamed through diamond-paned windows, illuminating simple but well-crafted furniture. A dresser, a chair, a small table with a basin of water. Someone had placed fresh clothes on the chair. Soft trousers, a tunic and a woolen vest, all in shades of grey and deep green. My dungeon rags were gone. I was clean. Someone had bathed me while I slept, and my hair, which had been a matted mess of tangles, now fell in clean waves around my shoulders. The shackle scars on my wrists had been treated with some kind of salve that had already begun to fade their angry red to pink. The door opened quietly, and Kyle entered carrying a tray. He'd changed from his armor into simpler clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, though the shadows still clung to him like faithful pets. His crimson eyes widened slightly when he saw me awake. "Good morning," he said, setting the tray on the table. "Or rather, good afternoon. You've been asleep for nearly 18 hours. I struggled to sit up, my body protesting the movement. Everything ached in ways I hadn't felt in the cell, the deep muscle soreness that comes from actual use rather than atrophy. "Did you? Were you the one who—" "No," he said quickly, understanding my unspoken question. "I have a friend, Mira. She's a healer who lives in the village 2 valleys over. She came last night to tend to you, ensured you were clean and comfortable. I stayed far away, I assure you. Relief and something else, possibly disappointment, flickered through me. Thank you. For your discretion and for all of this." I gestured vaguely at the room, the care taken with my person. "You needed rest. Your body had been through trauma the mind couldn't fully process until you were somewhere safe." He moved to the window, giving me space, though his reflection in the glass showed he was watching me carefully. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm made of bruises and broken glass," I admitted. "But also, better than I have in years. The food smells incredible." He smiled, that same transformation I'd seen in the Shadow Roads. "Mira left instructions for your diet. Nothing too heavy at first. Your stomach needs to adjust. There's broth, soft bread, some cheese, and tea with healing herbs. Once you've eaten, if you feel up to it, I thought we might talk properly." After he left to give me privacy to dress and eat, I took my time with both. The clothes fit surprisingly well, and the food tasted like something from a dream. Flavors I'd forgotten existed. Each bite was a revelation, and I had to force myself to eat slowly, as Kyle had warned. When I finished, I found him in the cottage's main room, a comfortable space with a large fireplace, shelves full of books, and windows that looked out over the valley. He was reading something in that strange language I'd heard him speak before, but he set the book aside when I entered. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "I imagine you have questions." "So many I don't know where to start," I admitted, settling into the chair. "But let's begin with the obvious one. Why me? You said I'm the key to breaking a curse, but I'm nobody. I was a village girl before the High Regent's soldiers came. I have no magic, no special knowledge, nothing that would make me important enough for a prince to spend 3 years planning a rescue." Kyle leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression serious. "You are not nobody, Arya. You were never nobody. Tell me, what do you remember about your parents?" The question caught me off guard. "My parents? What do they have to do with any of this?" "Everything," he said quietly. "Please, what do you remember?" I closed my eyes, reaching back into memories I'd tried not to access in the cell, fearing they would break me. My mother was a weaver, known throughout our region for her work. My father was a scholar, though the village thought him odd for preferring books to farming. They were kind, loving. They died when I was 16 in a plague that swept through our village. And after they died, what happened to you? I lived alone in their cottage, survived on my weaving, my father's small savings. The other villagers, I paused, the old hurt still fresh. They were never comfortable around me after my parents passed. They said I was too strange, too much like my father with my questions and my books. When the High Regent's soldiers came asking about rebels in our area, the villagers were quick to point them toward me. Because you were different. Because you asked questions. Because somewhere deep down, they feared you without understanding why. Kyle stood and moved to a shelf, pulling down a leather-bound journal. Your parents weren't who they claimed to be, Arya. Your mother wasn't just a weaver, and your father wasn't just a scholar. He handed me the journal. The leather was old, but well-maintained, and when I opened it, I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. My throat tightened. Where did you get this? From a mutual friend who recovered it from your cottage before the High Regent's forces could burn everything. Read the marked page. With shaking hands, I turned to the ribbon marker. The entry was dated 2 months before my parents' deaths. The High Regent grows bolder in his persecution of the light touched. 3 more families disappeared last week, taken in the night. Elena and I have hidden our natures well for 17 years. but I fear it's only a matter of time before suspicion falls on us. The plague that approaches our village is no natural sickness. I've identified traces of dark magic in its spread, a deliberate culling of those the Regent deems dangerous. If the worst happens, if we cannot protect Arya ourselves, I pray our message reaches Kael Shadowborn. He is the only one who might understand what she is, what she will become. The prophecy of the eclipse moon cannot be denied, and our daughter is its embodiment, the child born when light and shadow were perfectly balanced, who carries both within her blood. May the old gods watch over her when we cannot. I read the passage 3 times, the words refusing to make sense. Light-touched? Prophecy? This can't be. Your parents were light mages, Arya, powerful ones, who fled to your village to escape the High Regent's purges. And you, he knelt beside my chair, his eyes level with mine. You are something that hasn't existed in Ethelmore for over a century. You are Dualheart, born with the capacity for both light and shadow magic. I shook my head, rejection automatic. That's impossible. I've never done magic. You can't in the dungeon because the black stone suppressed it. You can't now because you've been taught all your life to fear your own power, to hide it so thoroughly that even you don't know it's there. He took my hands, careful of my healing wrists. But I've seen the signs. The way shadows respond to your presence, trying to help you, even when you don't realize it. The light that flickers at the edge of your vision when you're emotional. Your impossible survival in that cell when others broke within months. The curse, I whispered, understanding beginning to dawn. The curse you mentioned is the reason the Dark Realm has been dying for 20 years. When the High Regent murdered my father and took the throne, he disrupted the ancient balance that kept this land vital. Light and shadow must exist in equilibrium, but he's tried to purge all light magic, believing shadow alone will make him more powerful. Instead, it's poisoning everything. The land, the people, the very essence of Ethelmore itself. I pulled my hands from his, standing abruptly and moving to the window. Outside, the valley looked peaceful, untouched by the darkness he described. But even here, I could see signs if I looked closely. The way certain trees seemed twisted, their bark blackened in patterns that didn't occur naturally. The stream, beautiful as it was, ran darker than it should. So you need me to what? Restore this balance? My voice came out harsher than intended. I'm supposed to save your realm with magic I don't know how to use, that I'm not even sure I have. Not my realm, Kyle said quietly. Our realm. This is your home too, Arya, whether you remember it or not. And yes, I need your help. But more than that, the land needs you. The people need you. Every day the imbalance continues. More suffer. I turn to face him. And what about what I need? What about the fact that I spent 3 years in hell because of this realm's politics? What about the life I could have had if my parents hadn't been hunted like animals? His expression didn't change, but I saw him flinch slightly at my words. You have every right to your anger. Do refuse me, refuse this calling, and live out your days peacefully in this cottage or anywhere else you choose. I won't force you, Arya. I won't manipulate you. The choice is yours, but if I refuse, people die. People are already dying. They've been dying for 20 years. If you refuse, that continues. If you help me, he stood, moving closer but not touching me. If you help me, we might end this. We might restore what was broken. We might give thousands of people, light-touched families, innocent children, entire villages, a chance at survival. The weight of it pressed down on me like physical force. How could I refuse? How could I live with myself knowing I had the power, supposedly, to help and chose not to? But how could I agree to something so impossibly huge when I didn't even understand what I was? I need time, I said finally. Time to think, to process all of this. Time to see if I actually have any magic at all, because right now I feel exactly as powerless as I did in that cell. Of course, take all the time you need. But Arya, his voice softened. While you're thinking, let me teach you. Let me show you how to access the power that's sleeping inside you. Even if you ultimately decide to refuse my request, you deserve to know yourself fully. You deserve to reclaim what was stolen from you. I studied his face, looking for any sign of manipulation or hidden agenda. Instead, I saw only earnest hope and something else, something that looked like the same desperate loneliness I'd felt in my cell. The bone-deep isolation of being the only one who understood certain truths. All right, I agreed. Teach me. But I'm making no promises beyond that. The relief that washed over his features was almost painful to witness. Thank you. We'll start tomorrow, after you've had more time to recover. For now, rest, eat, let yourself heal. He moved toward the door, then paused. There's a path behind the cottage that leads to a clearing by the stream. It's peaceful there, Private. If you need space to think, that's where I'd recommend. After he left, I did exactly that. I followed the narrow path through ancient trees until I reached the clearing he'd described. The stream widened here into a small pool, the water so clear I could see smooth stones at the bottom. I sat on a flat rock at the water's edge and finally allowed myself to fully feel everything I'd been holding back. The tears came hard and fast, years of suppressed grief and rage and fear pouring out. I cried for my parents, for the life stolen from me, for the girl I'd been who died in that dungeon even if her body survived. I cried for the impossible situation I now found myself in, for the weight of responsibility I'd never asked for. But I also cried with relief. I was free. I was alive. The sun was warm on my face, and I could hear birds singing, and I could walk away from this stream whenever I wanted, and no one would stop me. The simple joy of that, the precious gift of agency, was almost too much to bear. When the tears finally subsided, I felt hollowed out but cleaner somehow, as if I'd purged some poison. I trailed my fingers in the stream, watching the water flow around them, and that's when I saw it, a faint glow emanating from my hand. Not the reflection of sunlight, but something else, something from within. I jerked my hand back, startled, and the glow vanished. My heart pounded. Had I imagined it? But no. When I tentatively placed my hand back in the water, the glow returned, soft as moonlight, the color of dawn breaking over mountains. Light, my light. I sat there for a long time, watching that gentle glow pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, and felt something shift inside me. A door I hadn't known existed, slowly beginning to open. The next weeks passed in a rhythm I'd never experienced before. Lessons with Kyle each morning, solitary practice each afternoon, quiet dinners where we talked about everything and nothing, and nights where I slept dreamlessly in a real bed. Mira visited twice more, monitoring my recovery and teaching me herbal lore, with the casual assumption that of course I'd want to learn. She was a round woman with kind eyes and hands that smelled of sage, and she never asked about my time in the dungeon, for which I was grateful. Kyle proved to be a patient teacher, though his methods were unconventional. He didn't start with theory or history, but with sensation and instinct. Magic isn't something you learn, he explained on our first morning of training. We stood in the clearing by the stream, early light filtering through the trees. It's something you remember. It's as natural as breathing, as fundamental as your heartbeat. The trick is unlearning all the blocks society has placed between you and your own power. That sounds like mystical nonsense, I said, though without real heat. I was learning that Kyle had a tendency toward the poetic that clashed amusingly with his reputation as the terrifying Shadow Prince. He laughed, and I realized I was hearing that sound more often. Perhaps. But try this. Close your eyes and think about the dungeon. Not the fear or the pain, but the specific sensation of the darkness there. I did as he asked, though revisiting those memories made my chest tight. It was heavy, oppressive. It pushed in from all sides. Good. Now think about this clearing. How does the darkness here feel different? I considered it, really paying attention to the quality of shadow beneath the trees, in the spaces between leaves. It's lighter, not just because there's more sun, but The darkness itself feels different, gentler, almost welcoming. Exactly. That's because you're sensing the nature of shadow in each place. In the dungeon, it was corrupted, forced to serve the High Regent's purposes. Here it's natural, balanced with light. Now, and this is important, reach out with that same sense. Feel for the light. I tried, not entirely sure what I was reaching for. At first, nothing. Then gradually, I became aware of something warm at the edge of my consciousness. Not the physical warmth of the sun on my skin, but an inner warmth, a glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I feel something, I whispered, afraid to break the connection. Let it in. Don't force it, just allow it. The warmth grew stronger. And when I opened my eyes, I saw light gathering around my hands. Not the faint glow I'd seen that first day, but genuine radiance, bright enough to cast shadows. I gasped and the light flickered. Don't be afraid of it, Kyle said. His own shadows were manifesting around him in response, darkness and light swirling in the space between us. It's yours. It's you. You can't hurt yourself with your own magic. Over the following days, I learned to call the light more easily, to shape it, to send it flowing from one hand to another like water. It responded to emotion, brightening with joy, dimming with doubt, but Kale taught me how to maintain it regardless of my mood, how to make it a tool rather than just a reflection. Magic is will made manifest, he explained. Your emotions fuel it, but your intent directs it. The balance between the two is what makes a mage powerful rather than just dangerous. He taught me shadow as well, though I struggled with it more. Light felt natural, like coming home. Shadow felt foreign, uncomfortable, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. But Kyle was insistent. You must master both or you'll never achieve true balance. Light without shadow is blinding, destructive in its own way. Shadow without light is the corruption that's poisoning the realm. You need both, Arya. It's your gift and your burden. One afternoon, perhaps 3 weeks into my training, I finally managed to hold both simultaneously, light in one hand, shadow in the other, neither overwhelming its opposite. The sensation was indescribable, like I was finally standing upright after years of being tilted, like a song I'd been hearing off-key suddenly resolved into perfect harmony. Kale's face, when he saw it, was worth every frustrating moment of practice. Pure joy, unguarded and genuine? Yes, that's it exactly. That's what you are, Arya, that balance made flesh. But that evening, sitting across from him at dinner, I finally voiced the question that had been growing louder in my mind with each passing day. When do we talk about what comes next? I'm learning, yes, and it's extraordinary, but I'm not practicing just for the sake of it. You need me for something specific. What is it? Gale set down his fork, his expression growing serious. You're right. I've been putting off this conversation because He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. Because once I tell you, once you fully understand what I'm asking, you might hate me for it. I think I deserve to know what you rescued me for, I said quietly. Even if I end up hating you, he nodded slowly. The curse binding the realm isn't just a metaphorical imbalance. It's a literal magical construct woven by the High Regent when he took the throne. He used ancient forbidden magic to bind the realm's essence to his will, ensuring that as long as he rules, shadow dominates and light is suppressed. It's what allows him to track and destroy light mages so effectively, the land itself rejects them. So we need to break the curse, I said. What does that require? A ritual, one that can only be performed by someone who carries both light and shadow in equal measure, someone who can stand at the point of balance and reweave what was broken. That's you, Arya. You're the only person in Ethelmore who can do this. And you? What's your role in this ritual? His jaw tightened. I provide the shadow component. The ritual requires massive amounts of both light and shadow magic, more than any single person could channel safely. You'll draw on light, I'll draw on shadow, and together we'll have enough power to break the High Regent's binding and restore the natural balance. It sounded reasonable, but something in his tone, in the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes, set off warning bells. What aren't you telling me? He stood abruptly, moving to the fireplace, his back to me. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The ritual requires a life price. Magic of this magnitude always does. The caster must give up something vital, something irreplaceable, or the working won't hold. My blood went cold. What kind of life price? Not death, he said quickly, turning to face me. I would never ask that of you, but the ritual will burn out your ability to use light magic. Permanently, you would keep your shadow abilities. The part of you that's always been suppressed would remain. But the light, the gift you've only just discovered, it would be gone forever. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what he was saying. You want me to give up half of what I am? To cripple myself magically? No, God, no, Arya, I don't want that at all. He moved toward me, anguish clear on his face. I hate that this is the cost. I've spent 20 years searching for another way, consulted every magical scholar still living, explored every alternative. There is no other option. It's this, or the realm continues to die, so it's not really a choice at all. Bitterness flooded my mouth. Either I sacrifice my newly discovered power, or I condemn thousands to suffering. That's a hell of a decision to lay on someone who just learned to do magic 3 weeks ago. I know. And if there were any other way, but there isn't. I stood, needing to move, to do something with the energy crackling through me. Light and shadow both sparked at my fingertips, responding to my agitation. When would this ritual happen? Do I have time to at least enjoy these powers before I lose half of them? The eclipse moon, he said quietly. When light and shadow are in perfect balance in the sky, they'll be easiest to balance in the ritual. That's 2 months from now. 2 months. 60 days to have both parts of myself before losing one forever. It seemed impossibly short and terrifyingly long at the same time. I need to think, I said. Alone. I left the cottage before he could respond, walking blindly into the forest. The path didn't matter. My feet carried me automatically toward the clearing, my sanctuary. But this time, the peace I usually found there was absent. My mind churned with questions, arguments, rage. How dare he rescue me only to ask me to hobble myself? How dare he teach me to love this power only to prepare me to lose it? And yet, how dare I refuse when people were suffering, when children were being hunted and villages dying and the land itself was poisoned? I screamed into the night, frustration pouring out as raw sound. Light erupted from my hands, bright enough to turn the clearing into daylight. Shadows responded, twining around the light in patterns I hadn't consciously directed. The two magics danced and warred, and ultimately merged into something neither light nor dark, but somehow both. It's beautiful, isn't it? I spun to find Kyle at the edge of the clearing. I hadn't heard him approach, but shadows whispered around him apologetically. They'd concealed his presence without his asking, trying to protect me from interruption. What you're doing right now, he continued, stepping closer. That's what the realm should be. That perfect dance, light and shadow in constant motion, each making the other more beautiful. Instead, it's all shadow now, heavy and sick and wrong. Don't, I said. Don't manipulate me with pretty words and appeals to my conscience. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm trying to be honest. He stopped a few feet away, careful not to crowd me. You asked what you need. I'll tell you, you need to choose for yourself, based on what you value, what you can live with. If you decide you can't make this sacrifice, I'll find another way, somehow, even if it takes another 20 years. But more people will die in those 20 years. Yes, he said simply, but they're not your responsibility, Arya. You didn't create this situation. You're a victim of it as much as anyone. You owe the realm nothing, I laughed bitterly. Then why do I feel like I owe it everything? Because you're better than most people. Because you have a hero's heart, even if you don't see yourself that way. He moved closer, close enough that I could see the weariness in his face, the weight he'd been carrying for so long. Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you. If you want to walk away, I'll make sure you have everything you need to build a new life somewhere safe. If you want to go through with the ritual, I'll be beside you every step, sharing as much of the burden as I can. Why? The question burst out of me. Why do you care so much? You hardly know me. I'm just the key to breaking a curse, a tool for your purposes. Why do you look at me like you matter? He finished softly. Because you do. Not because of what you can do or what magic you carry, but because of who you are. The woman who survived 3 years of hell without breaking. The woman who feeds rats and cries over stars. The woman who fights me tooth and nail in training and then laughs when she finally gets a technique right. He took a breath. You matter to me, Arya. More than is probably wise, more than I intended when I first set out to rescue you. My heart hammered against my ribs. Kyle, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know that my asking this of you isn't cold calculation. It's desperate hope that somehow we might both save the realm and keep you whole. But if I can only have one, I choose you whole. Every time. The light and shadow still swirled around us, responding to the emotional weight of the moment. Without consciously deciding to, I reached out and touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. His eyes closed briefly at the contact, and I felt the shadows around him shiver. I hate that you've given me this choice, I whispered. I hate that it's mine to make. I know, but I think I know what I have to do. His eyes opened, searching mine. You don't have to decide tonight. Take the full 2 months. Use them to live, to experience everything you can with your powers intact. What if I want to experience something else? The words came out before I could stop them, bold in a way I hadn't known I could be. What if I want to know what it's like to be close to someone who sees me, really sees me, not as a prisoner or a tool or a prophesied savior, but just as Arya? Understanding dawned in his face, followed by something that looked like wonder. Then I would tell you that I've wanted exactly that since I first spoke your true name in that cell. But I would also make sure you understood that you're under no obligation, that my feelings don't factor into your decision about the ritual. I kissed him, cutting off his careful nobility. For a moment he froze, surprised. But then his arms came around me, and he kissed me back with all the desperate hunger of two people who'd been alone too long. Light and shadow exploded around us, merging and dancing in patterns that would have been impossible for either of us to create separately. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Are you sure? He asked. About this, about us, about any of it? No, I admitted. I'm not sure about anything. But I know I don't want to spend the next 2 months alone with my thoughts and doubts. I know I want to feel alive, to feel connected to someone who understands. Is that enough? It's more than enough. It's everything. We stayed in the clearing until the true night grew cold, talking and kissing and occasionally just sitting in comfortable silence. He told me about his childhood, about what it was like to be feared for powers he didn't understand. I told him about my parents, real stories now, that I could access those memories without pain. We spoke about the future, both the immediate future of training and preparation, and the distant, uncertain future that waited beyond the ritual. What happens after? I asked eventually, assuming the ritual works and I lose my light magic. What then? Then we rebuild, Kyle said. We establish a new government, one that protects both light and shadow mages. We heal the land, restore what's been corrupted. He hesitated. We figure out how to live in a world we've saved, if you'll let me be part of your life beyond this mission. You think I'd go through all this with you and then just leave? I think you'd be entirely justified in leaving. I'm the one who involved you in this mess, who asked you to sacrifice. I pressed my fingers to his lips. Stop. I'm making my own choices now, including the choice to see where this goes. Unless you don't want, I want, he said fervently. I want so much it terrifies me. Over the following weeks, we trained harder than ever. But now, there was a different quality to our time together. An intimacy that went beyond teacher and student, beyond prince and prophecy bearer. We learned each other's fighting styles, magical signatures, the tiny details that make someone familiar. He taught me to shadow step, to move through darkness the way he did. I taught him to create light shields that didn't drain him the way shadow shields did. Mira noticed the change immediately on her next visit. "Well," she said, cornering me while I helped her prepare tea, "something's different about you two. You're both glowing, metaphorically speaking, though given your magic, possibly literally too." I felt my face heat. "Is it that obvious? Honey, Kyle looks at you like you hung the moons, and you look at him like he's the answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. So yes, obvious." She squeezed my hand. "I'm glad. He's been alone too long, and you deserve happiness after what you've been through, even if it's temporary." I asked quietly, "Even if the ritual takes half of what I am?" Mira's expression grew serious. "Especially then. Love doesn't require perfect circumstances, Arya. It requires honest hearts and the courage to be vulnerable. You both have that." She paused, then added, "Though for what it's worth, I don't think losing your light magic will make you half of what you are. Your power doesn't define you. Your choices do." Her words stayed with me as the days counted down. 6 weeks until the eclipse. 4 weeks. 2 weeks. Each day felt precious, heightened, like I was living multiple lives simultaneously. I threw myself into training, determined to master every technique Kyle could teach me. I memorized the feeling of light magic flowing through me, the joy of calling dawn into being with a thought, the satisfaction of weaving light into shields and weapons and art. But I also let myself love, let myself be vulnerable with Kale in ways I'd never been with anyone. We talked deep into the night, sharing fears and dreams. We laughed over his terrible attempts at cooking and my complete inability to navigate by stars. We fought occasionally, sharp, passionate arguments about tactics or philosophy that ended in either sullen silence or furious kissing, depending on the day. "You're impossible," I told him after one such argument about whether I should practice the ritual components without him present. "Overprotective and stubborn and completely in love with you," he said, the words stopping me mid-rant. "I know I have no right to feel that way this quickly, and I know I'm asking you to sacrifice so much, and I know—" "I love you too," I interrupted. "And I hate that I do because it makes everything more complicated, but I can't help it. You broke into a fortress for me. You've never once asked me to be anything but myself. How could I not love you?" The final week arrived too quickly. Kale began preparing the ritual site, a stone circle in the mountains above Thornhaven, ancient and powerful. I practiced the incantations until they were second nature, memorized the exact sequence of magical channels I'd need to open. We reviewed the plan endlessly. I would call the light, he would call the shadow. Together we would direct them at breaking the curse binding. When the curse shattered, I would release my light magic into the void, using it to seal the working permanently. Simple, straightforward, devastating. The night before the eclipse, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of our bedroom, because we'd stopped pretending we didn't want to fall asleep tangled together, watching the moons rise. Kale came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Second thoughts," he murmured against my hair. "About the ritual?" "No, I've made my peace with it." I leaned back against his chest. "But I'm terrified it won't work, or that something will go wrong, or that I'll lose you along with my magic. You won't lose me. I'll be right there and I'll be here after. Always if you'll have me, even when I'm only half-powered. When I can't create those light shows you love so much." He turned me to face him, his expression fierce. "You could lose all your magic tomorrow, and I would still love you. You could decide you hate me for involving you in this, and I would still love you. You are not your powers, Arya. You are your courage, your compassion, your strength. Those don't come from magic." I kissed him, trying to pour all my feelings into it, love and fear and gratitude and hope. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that these months with you have been the best of my life. You gave me back more than freedom. You gave me myself. You did that on your own," he corrected. "I just opened the door. We made love that night with a tenderness edged with desperation, both of us aware that tomorrow everything would change. Afterward, as he slept beside me, I allowed myself to mourn what I was about to lose. The light magic that had felt like coming home, the completeness of wielding both sides of my nature. Tomorrow I would be diminished, voluntarily crippled for the greater good, but I would also be whole in a different way. I would be someone who chose sacrifice over selfishness, who stood in the gap when others couldn't. I would be someone who saved a realm and earned the right to build a life in it. As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, I made a silent promise to my light magic. I would use every last second of it well. And when the time came to let it go, I would do so without regret, because some things, love, freedom, the chance to matter, were worth any price. The eclipse moon rose over Ethelmoor, its silver face slowly darkening as shadow and light prepared for their ancient dance. In a stone circle high in the mountains, two figures stood hand in hand, power gathering around them like a storm. Below, in villages and cities throughout the dark realm, people looked up at the changing sky and felt something shift, a loosening of chains they hadn't known they wore. A breath of hope entering lungs that had known only despair. The ritual began, light and shadow merging, and the world held its breath. In the end, balance was restored. The curse shattered like glass, its fragments dissolving into nothing. The High Regent's binding broke, and with it his hold on power. Light began to return to the dark realm, slowly but steadily, like life returning to frozen earth, and one woman, her hands empty of light but full of shadow, and the hand of the man she loved, stood at the center of it all and smiled. She had given up part of herself. She had paid the price, but she had also won freedom for thousands, won a future without fear, won the right to live openly with the person she loved in a realm reborn. Some would call her a hero, some would call her a martyr, but she knew what she truly was. Someone who had been broken and remade, who had found power and love in the darkest places, who had chosen hope over despair. She was Arya Lightweaver, who walked through shadow and emerged stronger. And her story, their story, was just beginning.